I worked closing shifts at the haunted mansion for nearly 3 years. Most guests think the attraction is creepy. It isn't, at least not during operating hours. When the lights are on backstage and hundreds of people are constantly moving through the building, it's just machinery, speakers, cables, and actors following procedures. The ride only becomes unsettling after midnight, when everything is supposed to be dead. My job that night was simple: do the final sweep, walk the track after shutdown, and make sure no guests were hiding in the attraction before maintenance crews arrived. It happened more often than people think. Teenagers would try to stay behind for a thrill. Influencers would hide hoping to film forbidden areas. Usually I found them within minutes. That night, the mansion had been shut down for almost 20 minutes. The power grid was off. The doom buggies sat motionless. Emergency work lights cast weak yellow pools across the dark ride. I signed the sweep log and entered through the maintenance access door. The silence felt wrong immediately. Not quiet. Listening. I moved through the attraction with a flashlight, checking corners and calling out the standard warning. Park security. If anyone is inside the attraction, identify yourself now. No response. Just the faint smell of dust and machine oil. Everything was normal until I reached the ballroom scene. That's when I heard the laughter. A child. Soft. Giggle. 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 It echoed across the massive room. I stopped walking. Every hair on my arm stood up. The ballroom should have been completely dark, completely silent. Its audio system was disconnected from power. I swept my flashlight across the scene. The giant banquet table, the chandeliers, the motionless ghost figures frozen in place. Nothing moved. Then the laughter came again, closer, directly below me. My flashlight landed on one of the dancing ghost animatronics, a woman in a faded ballroom gown. At first she appeared still, then her head turned, slowly, directly toward me. My stomach dropped. The ride was dead. There was no power, no compressed air, no control system. Nothing should have been moving, yet the ghost continued turning until its hollow eyes met mine, and then it smiled. Not the programmed smile, a different one, a knowing one. The child laughed again, behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. When I looked back, the ghost had returned to its original position, frozen. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. I started backing away. That's when I heard the track activate. Clack, clack, clack. Metal wheels moving. I ran toward the loading area. The sound grew louder. The doom buggies were moving, not forward, backward. Dozens of them, rolling against the normal ride path. Impossible. Their black shells emerged from the darkness one after another, empty, yet somehow operating. The safety systems should have prevented it, the power should have prevented it, but they kept coming, blocking the corridor ahead. I turned toward an emergency exit. Another doom buggy rolled from the darkness and stopped directly in front of the door, waiting. The ride path behind me began filling with them, silent black vehicles forming a wall, trapping me. Then every onboard speaker activated at once. A voice crackled through the darkness. Not the ghost host, not any recording I recognized. a child whispering, "You missed one." The emergency lights flickered. For a split second, hundreds of figures stood throughout the ballroom, not animatronics, people, pale, motionless, watching. Then darkness swallowed them again. I don't remember how I got out. Security found me sitting outside the attraction nearly an hour later. According to the incident report, the ride never restarted. The power logs showed no activity, no vehicle movement, no audio playback, nothing. But before I quit, I checked one last thing, the sweep log. My signature was there. Beneath it was another entry written in faded handwriting, dated 1978, the year an employee disappeared during a closing inspection. Next to his name, someone had written, "Sweep incomplete. One guest remains." Working overnight maintenance at a theme park sounds exciting until you actually do it. Most nights were spent cleaning ride tracks, replacing bulbs, and fixing equipment that thousands of guests had abused during the day. Boring, predictable, routine. I liked it that way. For 6 years, I worked the graveyard shift on Pirates of the Caribbean. The attraction felt completely different after closing. Without music, guests, and moving boats, the ride became a cavern of shadows and dripping water. The air smelt permanently of chlorine, mildew, and damp concrete. At 3 in the morning, it barely felt like a ride at all. It felt ancient, abandoned, like something forgotten beneath the park. The night everything changed started with ashes. Guest ashes are more common than most people realize. Families sometimes scatter cremated remains inside attractions they loved. It's illegal, dangerous, and unfortunately, it happens. Maintenance crews are trained to recognize the signs. That night, I was inspecting the water near the burning city scene when I noticed gray powder drifting across the surface. Not dirt, not dust, ash, fresh ash. The particles floated in small clouds, illuminated by my flashlight. My stomach sank immediately. Someone had done it again. I grabbed a skimmer net and stepped onto the maintenance platform beside the water. The ride was completely shut down. No boats moving, no audio, just the constant dripping of water somewhere in the darkness. I leaned over, lowered the net, and felt something grab me. A hand. Not a splash, not debris, a hand. It erupted from beneath the black water and locked around my wrist. The sensation was impossible to describe. Cold, wet, and gritty, like being grabbed by a fist made entirely of soaked fireplace ash. I screamed. The flashlight flew from my hand and vanished into the water. The grip tightened instantly. Gray sludge smeared across my arm as something beneath the surface pulled downward, hard. My shoulder slammed against the platform railing. For one horrifying second, I saw a face beneath the water, human-shaped, formed entirely from drifting ash. Its empty eye sockets stared directly into mine. Then I yanked free. The hand exploded into gray clouds and disappeared beneath the surface. The water became perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. I reported the incident as a fall. Nobody would have believed the truth. Honestly, I barely believed it myself. At first, I convinced myself exhaustion had caused some kind of hallucination until the reflection started. 3 nights later, I was washing my hands in the employee locker room. I glanced into the mirror. Someone stood behind me, a dark figure dripping water onto the floor. Its skin looked blackened and cracked like wet charcoal. I spun around, nobody there. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone. I told myself it was stress. Then I saw it again. In puddles, in dark windows, in standing water beside maintenance roads, always behind me, always closer. The figure never moved when I looked directly at it, only in reflections, only in darkness, waiting, watching, dripping. Weeks passed. The sightings became more frequent. Sometimes I could even hear water falling onto the floor behind me. Drip, drip, drip. But whenever I turned around, the sound stopped. One night, I finally got a clear look. A maintenance tunnel beneath the ride had flooded after a pipe leak. Several inches of dark water covered the concrete floor. My flashlight beam reflected across the surface as I walked. Then I saw him, standing directly behind me in the reflection, closer than ever. The soot-covered figure towered over my shoulder. Water streamed from its body continuously. Its face looked unfinished, like features sculpted from wet ash that never fully hardened. And resting where its eyes should be, tiny orange embers, glowing, watching. For the first time, it spoke, not aloud, inside the reflection. Its mouth opened, water poured out, and I heard the words as clearly as if someone whispered directly into my ear. "You left part of me behind." Then the tunnel lights died, every single one. The darkness became absolute. I felt cold water splash behind me. A single wet footprint appeared beside my boots, then another, walking closer. I ran. I don't remember reaching the surface. I only remember sunlight, breathing, and deciding I was done. I resigned the following week. That was 7 years ago. I've never returned to the park, but the figure never completely disappeared. Sometimes months pass without seeing it. Then I'll glance into a lake at sunset, a rain puddle, a black television screen, and there it is, standing silently behind me, a little closer every year, still dripping, still waiting. Because recently I've started noticing something new. The reflection no longer appears only when I'm near water. Now it shows up in mirrors too. And last night, for the first time, it wasn't standing behind me, it was standing beside me, looking toward the front door, like it's waiting for the park to close one final time before taking me back to retrieve whatever part of it I accidentally left in the water. The underground tunnels were never meant for guests. Most people imagine theme parks as bright, cheerful places full of music and smiling characters. They never see the miles of concrete corridors hidden beneath everything. The employees called them utilidors, a maze of service tunnels carrying electrical lines, maintenance equipment, supplies, and costumed performers from one side of the park to the other. I worked overnight security down there for 4 years. The job was usually uneventful. Watch cameras, check access doors, make sure nobody wandered into restricted areas. Simple. at least until the night I saw the costume. It was just after 2:30 a.m. The park had been closed for hours. Maintenance crews were finishing their rounds, and most of the tunnels were empty. I was sitting in the surveillance office drinking stale coffee when movement appeared on camera 18. At first I barely looked. Then I froze. Someone in a costume was walking through Corridor D. That alone wasn't unusual. The costume was. Even through the grainy black-and-white monitor, I recognized it immediately. I'd seen photographs during training, a vintage mascot costume retired decades ago, the kind displayed in company archives, the kind nobody wore anymore. The oversized head looked faded and misshapen. One ear sagged lower than the other. The character limped heavily as it moved down the hallway, dragging one foot. Pause, drag, pause, drag. The motion made my skin crawl, not because it was threatening, because it looked injured. I radioed maintenance. Nobody was supposed to be in that section of the tunnel, especially not wearing archival costumes. No one answered. The radio hissed with static. I switched channels. Nothing, just static. The figure continued limping through the restricted electronics corridor, a section containing wiring conduits and power systems. No reason for performers to be there. I watched it disappear around a corner. Then I left the surveillance office. The tunnel felt unusually cold. My flashlight beam bounced across concrete walls painted decades earlier. The air smelled faintly of dust and machine oil. Far ahead, I could hear something dragging. Scuff, scuff, scuff. I followed the sound through a series of maintenance corridors. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. No ventilation hum, no machinery, just my footsteps and the dragging noise. Finally, I reached the electronics wing. The dragging had stopped. The hallway ahead stood empty. Then my flashlight landed on something slumped against the wall. The costume. It sat crumpled in the corner beneath a bundle of electrical conduits, motionless. I nudged it gently with my boot. The entire thing collapsed sideways, empty. No performer, no body, nothing, just fabric. The costume was completely hollow. A cold sensation spread through my chest because there was nowhere anyone could have gone. The corridor ended there. No exits, no doors, no maintenance access panels, just concrete. I backed away slowly. Then I heard the breathing. Heavy, wet, labored, directly behind the wall. Not inside the tunnel, inside the concrete. I froze instantly. The sound came again, a long inhale followed by a bubbling exhale. The noise vibrated through the wall itself, like lungs buried beneath the structure. My flashlight trembled. I aimed it toward the concrete. Nothing, just painted cinder block. Then the wall moved. Not much, just enough to notice. A slight outward bulge, as though something enormous behind it had leaned forward. The breathing grew louder, closer. A foul smell seeped from somewhere unseen. Wet earth, rotting cloth, stagnant water. I started backing away. The wall bulged again, this time further. A human-shaped impression slowly appeared from beneath the paint. A face, not emerging, pressing from the other side. The outline of a massive cartoon head pushed against the concrete like soft flesh.
2 enormous eye sockets, a wide, smiling mouth, the exact shape of the costume lying empty at my feet. My knees nearly gave out. Then another face appeared beside it, and another, dozens of character shapes pressing outward from inside the walls, all breathing, all watching. The lights flickered once, and every face opened its mouth simultaneously. The sound that came out wasn't speech, it was applause. Slow, rhythmic, thousands of unseen hands clapping somewhere deep within the walls. I ran. The security cameras showed nothing, no costume, no movement, no record of anyone entering the corridor. Management assumed exhaustion, stress, hallucinations. I resigned 2 weeks later, but before I left, an older maintenance supervisor pulled me aside. When I described the costume, his expression changed immediately. Then he asked a question that still haunts me. Did it have one ear lower than the other? I nodded. The man became very quiet. Finally, he said, "They sealed that one up in 1967. I asked what he meant. He wouldn't answer, just walked away. To this day, whenever I think about those tunnels, I remember the breathing, because the worst part wasn't the faces in the wall. It was realizing they sounded exhausted, like they'd been trapped down there for decades, and every night after the park closes, they're still trying to find a way back into their costumes.